In a world where so many things knowledge worker used to do can be automated by AI, the bar to stay relevant and create value is being raised higher in every domain. Only those who possess excellent expertise in their domain will continue to thrive. So, how do we become one of those winners? Is a solution mastering the latest AI tools to maximize our productivity? Or is it to get as many AI certificates as we can to make our resume relevant? The answer is actually the opposite of artificial intelligence. It is human intelligence deep at work. In today's episode, let's find out what is deep work and how deep work can not only save but supercharge our career in this competitive climate. The concept of deep work discussed in today's episode is heavily inspired by the book Deep Work by Cal Newport. He defines deep work as professional activities performed in a state of distraction-free concentration that pushes our cognitive abilities to the limit. The result of deep work is high quality output that is difficult to replicate. Deep work should leverage our expertise to produce value not only to ourselves but also to the organization we work for. By doing more deep work, our expertise levels up. And that's what we want. In a world where the bar for excellence is being raised higher in every domain, we need to be so good that we can't be ignored. And in order for that to happen, we need to spend the majority of our work time in deep work. But the reality is, many knowledge workers' day is consumed by shallow work. Shallow work, which is the opposite of deep work, is non-cognitively demanding logistical work like managing emails or responding to Microsoft Teams messages that can be performed in a distracted state and doesn't create significant new value. Cal Newport even suggests a question that we can use to determine if an activity is deep or shallow. The question is, if we were to hire a recent graduate who is very smart to take over a task, how long would it take to train this person so that they can perform the task independently? The longer it takes to train our hypothetical recent graduate, the deeper the work. Ideally, the answer should be in years for the work to be deep. Now let's apply these definitions to a real flight example. As a product manager, a highly coveted skill is the ability to envision how the product should evolve in the future. This skill is very difficult, but is an extremely valuable skill that separates junior product managers from the cream of the crop. What would be the kind of deep work that utilizes and deepens this skill? An example would be studying industry and technology trends and form a perspective on what is possible for my product. Another example would be presenting this perspective to a group of decision makers who will be unlikely to buy in right away and who will ask a lot of questions. If a smart recent graduate were to pick up these activities, it would take them a few years to understand how the industry works, what makes customers buy the product, the working dynamics of the company, and to hone their persuasion skills. On the contrary, during surface level information exchange is shallow work. An example would be doing project status updates or running meetings where information is disseminated one way without meaningful discussion from the participants. If a smart recent graduate were to pick up an activity like doing project status update, it might take them a few weeks to learn where to find the information, who are the stakeholders, and how to put together a presentation that suits the communication style of the company. In my case, very little time could be spent researching on industry trends and drawing relevance to my product, and almost no time at all could be spent debating future plans with other stakeholders. Now it's your turn to take a few minutes to reflect upon your day. You might be surprised to realize how much of your day is also swallowed by shallow work. As you can see, deep work is valuable, but is extremely cognitively demanding. It requires uninterrupted focus and deep thinking, something that is very difficult to achieve when our days are fractured with meetings and our attention is constantly distracted by notifications and a tap on the shoulder for quick chats in the open office. So how do we do more deep work? First of all, the ability to work deeply is a muscle that needs to be trained. If you block off 1 hour, doesn't mean you're gonna be fully focused during that 1 hour. An untrained mind would get distracted. You might mean to go online to research something and end up being distracted by an unread message. You might get bored and seek relief from a quick scroll on social media that ends up taking up the whole hour. So have the right expectation that the beginning of deep work practice is going to be difficult. Secondly, intentionally block out time on your calendar for deep work. It could be 15, 30 minutes, 1 hour scattered throughout the day. The key is to honor that time block. For a start, keep it short, even 10 minutes would do. During that time block, resist the urge to go online, chat with someone, look for information, or open the fridge. Try to stick to the task on hand. Now, what if you are blocked by external information in order to complete that task? Well, the real answer is you actually can continue with the task without looking for the information right away, and I will get to that. But I understand that at the beginning, it can feel impossible to continue until that information is found. If that's the case, resist the urge to look for the information until the time block is over. If your time block is 5 minutes, wait until the 5 minutes is up before you start looking. This is to train the brain to resist the urge for instant gratification, an ability unfortunately many of us had lost thanks to social media. Okay, so how do I continue working on a task that requires external information? My approach is to work on a task based on logical blocks. For example, I need to prepare for a meeting where I present the market sizing and competitive landscape. Sounds like a task that requires a lot of external information, doesn't it? What I do during a deep work time block is to work on the presentation outline. I can plan on the structure of the meeting. Maybe I'll start off with the context, followed by the market overview, detailed calculation, and an analysis of the competitors. I keep placeholders for maybe 5 competitors, and I'll adjust based on the number of competitors I actually find later on. For each competitor, I think of a list of factors I would evaluate them on. It could be something like market presence, strength, and weaknesses. Now, as I plan my outline, I phrase the external information I need in the form of a question. For example, how many consumers have a streaming platform? What is the percentage of users who belong to the age group of 25 to 30 years old? Just to name a few. So this is so that when I have time to do the online research, I can zoom into these specific questions right away. At this point, some of you might say that your job requires you to be responsive all the time. There's no way you can disappear for an hour without responding to unplanned calls and messages. And that's a fair concern, which brings me to the third step of reclaiming deep work. Is this an expectation that is self-imposed, or does it come from your manager? Now, self-imposed expectation due to fear of missing out is a real thing. I used to worry all the time about what if someone messaged me for an urgent request, and that made me check my messages all the time. So I decided to run an experiment when I went on leave. I uninstalled my messaging app to prevent myself from checking for messages, and I wanted to wait until the end of my leave period to see if there was actually any urgent request. And what I found out when I came back from leave was that when people messaged me and realized I was away, they waited. So there was no real actual emergency that happened, and no house was burned in the process. That's how I found out that I had a self-imposed expectation to be responsive. However, if it is your company that expects you to be responsive all the time, you might want to have a conversation with your manager on how you plan to divide your time. Of course, you might have to do some explaining to your manager in terms of what kind of deep work activities you plan to do during those uncontactable time blocks. Please bear in mind that you cannot have zero shallow work. What we want to achieve is to keep shallow work to a minimum. Logically speaking, your manager should be supportive of deep work activities because they produce high quality, valuable output for the organization as well. But if you still get a hard no, then you now know it's not an environment that supports your growth and is something to consider. So to sum it up, the ability to do deep work, where you perform distraction-free, cognitively demanding work, is key to excelling in today's competitive climate. In order to do deep work, you need to intentionally block out time, free of distractions, and train your ability to focus. There are 3 steps you can take to embrace deep work. First, have the right expectation that deep work is going to be difficult. Second, practice resisting the urge to look for information until the time block is over. And thirdly, set up expectations with your manager in terms of how you plan to divide your time between deep versus shallow work. I strongly recommend you check out the book Deep Work by Cal Newport. it has many more fascinating examples on how top performers leverage deep work to get to where they are. That's it for today. Thank you for tuning in. Till we meet again. Meanwhile, live well and pursue your why.